Welcome to this week of A&N In Depth. I am going to be joined today by Ruben, who you guys have met before. He will be my co-host, and Heather. Heather is an associate professor of communication in Colorado. Welcome, Heather. Thank you so much, and welcome, Ruben.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So for us here in the United States, this week is Thanksgiving. And I don't know about you guys, but Thanksgiving is actually my favorite holiday. And while I understand that there are a lot of negative sort of things that go along with it, my favorite thing about it is that as a nation, we pause to give thanks for the blessings that we have or for the things we have. And I think it's such a cool holiday. And so this program is actually being released on Thanksgiving night, on Thursday night. And so I thought it would be really good for us to sit down and have a conversation about gratitude and the benefits of gratitude. Right now, we are in the midst of a pandemic that a lot of us thought would be over, and we can't find a lot to be grateful for. I don't know about you guys, but my family is going to be celebrating Thanksgiving outside on Friday because it's going to be raining in Maryland where we are on Thursday. And so it's a little bit different than what we would normally do. So why do you think, even in these times, and I want both of you to answer this, why do you think in these times it's good for us, especially good for us, to express gratitude for what we have? Heather, do you want to start, and then Ruben?
Yeah, I'd love to. So here's what I know. I know that we are living in the most depressed adult generation in U.S. history. Even Generation Z scores 10 points lonelier than even senior citizens, right? So there is this collective ache that the world is experiencing, and gratitude is one of the ways that we can respond to that ache. We know that if you were to even just write down 3 things that you're grateful for, and I make my students do it, if at the end of every day, you just think of 3 things that went well, that you're happy about, we see reduced depression and reduced anxiety. And unfortunately, we're living in a time where we need anything, right, that we can get our hands on that can make life just a little bit more livable. So gratitude is incredibly important in how we can respond to the angst and to the pain and the discomfort that all of us are experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. Gratitude for me has been something that has been super helpful during this time. I know personally, I'm someone who usually focuses on the negative. It feels like maybe as people we do that. But I have had people remind me, specifically my wife, if you have people in your life that can remind you of the gratitude that you do have, it has changed my focus. That doesn't mean that the things that make me feel a little bit negative go away, but it just puts it in its proper context for me. And as Heather so eloquently said, just putting those little things of gratitude, it can change your focus. At least for me, it's helped immensely.
So I guess one of my questions would be, and I want this to be a discussion, so we should feel free to talk to each other and to answer or ask each other questions. But as we are going forward, like, what should I be looking for in my life that I'm great? You know, like if I'm in a pandemic and I'm feeling all alone. You said generation, you said X, I think, or Z.
Oh, generation
Z. I get the generations confused. The Generation Z is, you said, the most depressed right now. Like, what should we be looking for in our lives that, I guess, you know, if I live by myself and I've lost my job, or, you know, my family members are sick and I can't be around them, it's hard to maybe look for something to be grateful for. It's really hard to see things in our lives, especially if we're feeling depressed, that we can hold on to. And what should we be like? How should we go about starting that process?
You know, I can say this, like, I'm not somebody that, well, let me say this. Just 2 letters, N-O, just if I was to flash no on the screen, in less than a second, your brain would release dozens of stress-producing hormones and neurotransmitters just from saying the word no, right? I teach communication, so I'm passionate about taking ownership of the words that we say to ourselves. We are very much susceptible to the messages that we say to our own brains. So I don't want to act like that doesn't happen. On the other side of that, what we talk about in communication is, how do we disrupt negative thoughts? Because your brain is actually hardwired. I think you would say earlier, I tend to think about all the negative things. Well, all of us do. Yeah. Our brains are actually wired to think in the negative. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. Optimism has to be taught.
Yeah. Really?
We automatically do. right? So your brain is naturally going to exist in the negative. So you have to interrupt those natural patterns and give it something positive to focus on. And that's why I say, like, it's not going to happen automatically. It's going to take work and it's going to take effort, but it's important. Now, that said, I'm also not the type of person that says, like, oh, I'm a Christian and so my life is happy and fabulous and God is good, right? Because I don't think that's helpful either. And I read scriptures where Hannah in Samuel, right? She shows up at the temple and it says that she cries out in the bitterness of her spirit and praise God. We serve a God who answers a bitter woman's prayer. So I think that's important, right? Like, we can come, hey, how's that to be grateful for? I am grateful that I serve a God that I can come as I am. And I don't have to fake it. I don't have to put a bow on it. I can show up in the bitterness of my spirit and he will still hear me.
Absolutely. You know, Heather, you make a great point, because I think for a lot of us, and Jennifer, maybe this is what you're alluding to, is just that it's hard for us specifically as Christians to come across that we are not grateful. You know, it's hard for us to come across that we don't have something to be grateful for, but sometimes it can be difficult. And sometimes we have this guilt that if I'm not grateful, I'm not being a good Christian. And as something that Heather has mentioned, it's so important that we see examples in the Bible that they themselves came to God with this mindset of, like, I can't be grateful right now, but we serve that God. And that itself, starting there, is empowering. And I also wanted to mention, from the generation Z that we're talking about, and maybe we'll touch on this a little bit later, but I don't know, social media and all these messages that we hear all around us, that it makes us feel even less grateful because we feel everyone else is doing fine, but I'm not. And so we kind of even hide our feelings, because I can't go out there not feeling grateful when deep down I'm not. And I don't know if that plays with us. That's something I want to throw out there.
That's a really interesting point about social media, because I was actually thinking about this the other day, and it was that especially at the beginning of the pandemic, and you had all these people who were like, I'm joining a masterclass, and I'm joining, I'm baking bread, and I've like resurfaced my backyard and built a pool and also painted and I don't know about you guys, but I've just been like working, and I haven't started any new projects. And I'm thinking, like, I don't want to say ungratefulness, but feel like, oh, I've just been given the gift of time. And I'm like, who? And it just felt very ungrateful to me to feel that, like, almost judging other people's gratefulness to some extent. You know, like, how could you be so grateful for, like, the gift of time when so many people are struggling? But it's such an interesting idea that as Christians, we do feel that maybe we are less Christian if we are ungrateful. And then we are comparing ourselves too on social media, aren't we? I compare myself to what I see. I'm not like, to Instagram influencers or whatever. We are, and that can make us a little less grateful.
Listen, for
and
me,
judgmental.
For me now, with all this time, as you mentioned, I know when this quarantine started, I would hear those things as well. But I was very self-aware of the mental drain it was doing on me, even though I wasn't doing breaking bread or all these things. It was just a mental drain, focusing on the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and that's tough in and of itself. So to focus on something else, and I had to kind of tell myself that it's okay to be drained, that it's okay to be worried, but at the same time, it allowed me to focus on the things that I wanted to get done. But I wasn't doing it at the same rate as if nothing was going on around us. So I had to acknowledge it at first.
So we almost say that, like, the opposite, or the dagger in the heart of gratitude to some extent is comparison to others, or like some sort of, I don't want to say ungratefulness, because I almost feel like ungratefulness is one thing, but when we start comparing ourselves to others and what others have, it kind of puts a dagger in the heart of our own gratefulness or our own gratitude.
Yeah. One of the ways that we even know who we are is through comparison. So we create our self-concept. We decide who we are, what we can dream, what we can achieve based on how we compare ourselves to others. So that's normal, right? Social media isn't normal. So it used to be that I compared myself to what? The 15 people in my class, my neighbors, you know what I mean? Really. But now I can't pee without comparing myself to 250 of my most cool friends that are doing things that seem so much more amazing than me. right? I mean, we have access to thousands of people at any given moment, and it didn't used to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I totally agree with you that social comparison which can be a good thing, because it can
Right.
cause you to run further than you would have ever thought you could possibly run. I speak in like track. I ran track in college. I have like all
That's
the
good.
scores. And what do you tell a track athlete? Every track athlete knows you never look in the lane of the person next to you. Because
Right.
looking at just going like this in track, that's like half a second that could have put me back in my own race. You could lose a race because you turned your head, right? So it's really important that we are intentional about where we're looking. So I totally resonate with that. And it's hard. It's hard. I know for me, like, just like you said, with the pandemic and everybody's finishing projects and all these awesome things, it can be hard to feel like you're behind. And at the same time, I've had to like intentionally say to my brain, I treat my brain like it's this separate entity, because I know how important it is to talk good messages to my brain. But I have to say to myself, like, who can I be grateful that something's happening for them? Right. So maybe the big break isn't happening for me.
Interesting.
But like right now, my friend we have been praying for 10 years, y'all, for my best friend to find a boyfriend. 10 years, Lord, we have come to you. 3 years ago, I told her, I want you to buy a tie, so that at least there's this like physical symbol that you can hang in your closet, and we can pray. And we're just going to say, God, like one day you're going to give my friend, nameless, a man who will wear this tie. And now here we are. She's finally met somebody, and I am so grateful for that. And so nothing is really happening exciting in my life, but I can pause and say, I see God in the neighborhood. It's the same God. The same God who showed up for her can show up for me. And I'm grateful for that.
That's so cool too. Yeah. Go ahead, Ruben.
No, I was just going to say that's really cool, because I know I've heard that myself, and it's been for me. And so now I want to ask you, Heather, how did you get to that point where you were able to directly say, all right, I'm going to focus on other people's enjoyment and the things they've done? Was it a difficult process? Because I know for some of us, it may be difficult to do that, because I don't want to say selfish inherently, but there's a moment of that.
So I have a book that's coming out in 2029, and it's called It's Not Your Turn. And the entire premise of the book is let me just tell you this story, because it's funny. I could not find a job. I had just finished I was in a PhD program. I was trying to get hired full-time at a college, and I couldn't find one. I'm like, God, I did everything right. I had a great GPA. You guys, I never took a summer off of school. From 2005 all the way till I graduated, I think in like 2017 with my PhD, I never took even a summer off. Wow. I felt like I did all the right things. And here I could not get a job. God, where are you? Where's my testimony? And at the exact same time, one of my best friends from 3rd grade called me, and she goes, Heather, you're not going to believe it. I got hired by NASA.
Oh gosh.
And I was like, I'm so, like, it's choking in my throat. I'm so happy for you. And I was happy for her, but I was also incredibly sad for myself. And I have had to learn that those two emotions can coexist at the same time. And that doesn't make me a bad person. That makes me a human being. I can be incredibly happy for you and also feeling really sad for myself. Right. So I just decided that who you are when it's not your turn is actually more important than who you will be when it is. Wow. And so again, it's like a conscious thing that I have to tell myself, Heather. I just said, you guys, last night I was sitting with my husband and we were feeling depressed about something. And I just said, babe, it's not our turn. And that's okay. It's not our turn. That doesn't mean it's never going to be our turn.
Right.
So what can we decide that we're grateful for? And we just bought a house in the summer in the Denver market, which is very hard to do. And so I said, you know what? Here we are. We're sitting in this house. I am grateful that God gave us this house. And so we had a Christmas tree up. I was like, I am grateful. It can be that small. Yeah. I'm grateful for this Christmas tree. And both of us, we just said 3 things. And by the time we went to bed, I'm not saying like the heavens parted and we were like, wow, this is amazing. But I did feel like I could go to bed, you know. Yeah. Sometimes his mercies are really new in the morning.
Yeah.
And also to just, you know, I want to go back to something you said. You said there's nothing going on in my life right now. So I'm really grateful for my friend. And some people would say that's something to be grateful for as well. Like my life is pretty calm right now. Everything is like sort of boring, So I can be great, like I can look at my friends and I think that there are some people who would be really grateful, like I'm sure like you said, you had things that you were grateful for, that's it's just like things are calm right now and I'm grateful that there's no like emergency or no
Yeah.
catastrophe or no like sort of excitement. But I also wanted to acknowledge because I think it's so cool because you have such a great attitude with this or you have practiced this and I do want to say that gratitude like everything else is a discipline, right? We have to
Yeah.
practice
Mm.
gratitude. It's not something like you said our brain doesn't necessarily go to the optimistic first, so it's something we have to practice. It's a discipline. But it would be so easy for you to say, in that moment, like your friend, I resent my friend from NASA, who got her job, or I resent my friend who is doing really well right now because, you know, I I don't have that and I don't see God showing up in my life. But to practice that gratitude and that discipline where you're able to say like, okay, maybe things aren't going in my life, but God is still showing up for us and he's still showing up for the people around me and for the people I love and for everyone else. That's quite the attitude to have. And again, you must have been practicing gratitude in order to get to that point to some extent because
I'm
yeah,
I'm really
Mm.
good at doing this. And let me just give this for anybody who's watching.
yeah,
It is okay, I believe, right? I'm not a pastor, but I believe it is okay to say to God, I don't feel this right now, and
Yeah.
I need you to help me feel it. I say
yeah,
about faith all the time. I did it last night. My faith response isn't really about me. It's about God giving me experiences by which he has built my faith. It's not like I just have faith. No, God
Mm.
gives us experiences that we can look back on
right.
when we say he showed up there, he'll show up again. This is on God, not me. And so I
Yeah.
say, God, I am jealous right now. Please take this away from me. And I have found for myself that if I just say it and am honest about the real emotions that I would never say out loud to somebody else, and I just say it to God, like, I need help with this. I need you to give me gratitude because I can't. He
Mhm.
does.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's overnight. I definitely think it takes time and process like anything else in our spiritual lives is a journey. But I've
Yeah.
seen him really do that for me. And so I encourage people to just be honest about what they're feeling and give it to God. You don't have to post it online if you don't want to, right? But you can tell him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so powerful. That's so powerful that to be able to tell him, because again, I don't know if this is something that I have, but going back to trying to present myself to God as already I'm good. I've gone through my emotions, but no, go to him when you're just struggling through it. Because for me and my journey, being able to see that and work with him and come to him with my emotions has been just develop my Christian faith, to be honest, because my gratitude is one that is hard for it to come about because like I said at the beginning, I'm one who focuses on the negative. I want all this is going to go all wrong. um, but just and looking back at my Christian walk, it's been like those moments that I was truly raw with God, that I just said, hey, this I'm not feeling that gratitude right now. Just like you said, Heather, I look back and it came about in those little things that I was ever to give gratitude for. Um,
Right.
and that's hard to do sometimes because we want to be able to be grateful for the big thing. And it's as if God is saying, look around. I appreciate what you said, Heather, about we looked at the Christmas tree and we were grateful about the Christmas tree. Because I can do that right now in my own home. I can look
Mhm.
around and say, my wife and I, we can look around and say, we're grateful for this. In fact, she's the one who reminds me more than anyone else. Uh, hey, let's be grateful about these little things because I'm the one that walks in with the negativity. And I have to remind myself, hey, there are things to be grateful for.
Let me say this on the
Yeah.
Sermon on the Mount. The first thing Jesus says is it takes him 30 years to preach his first sermon. And what he says is, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God, right? That term that he used there in the Greek, the poor in spirit, is to be a spiritual beggar.
Mm.
Mhm.
So Jesus flips everything on its head right there with the Sermon on the Mount. And essentially what he says is the kingdom of heaven doesn't belong to people who say, I've got this, I'm good. It belongs to people who realize I bring nothing to the table, God, and I know it. And I am willing to stand on a street corner. I don't care who sees me. I need you.
Mm.
I don't
Yeah.
think and this is what Paul says, I glory in my weakness because God is made strong, right? Like we don't have to, it's a trick of the devil to make us think that if we're not good, somehow we're falling short. That's actually
Yeah.
the point. God is actually better when we recognize that we bring that
Right.
to the table. The kingdom of heaven belongs to the spiritual beggar.
Wow.
Yeah, and also like that gratitude in our weaknesses when we're saying like thank you, when we're in our weakness, it's almost like there's more to be thankful for. I don't know, like the Bible says give thanks in all things, and when we're grateful, and you were saying this, it changes your attitude and it helps us come out of that sort of maybe negativity or that spiritual brokenness. If we can start finding small things to be like a little bit more grateful about, or as we're, like you said, begging to God, I need you, just the fact that we know he's there and we can go to him with that is the beginning of
Yeah.
something.
Last night, I told you there's something going on in my husband's and I's lives. And I just went up in my room and I prayed last night and I said, you know what, though? I haven't done anything wrong. So do I feel successful right now in this particular area? I do not. But is that okay if I still have my integrity? Yes. I haven't done anything wrong. And I am coming to God and I am praying over this issue and nothing's changing. But I have to back up and just say, then I trust you. Right? Stephen Furtick says, God's love language is trust. And I'm trying to realize that in my own life and work that through my journey to say, even if nothing changes, can I trust God enough to say that this is okay? Though he slay me, Job, though he slay me, yet shall I trust him. I want to live that. And let's be real. We see the world literally burning down around us. What kind of generation do you think God is going to need to stand up in the last days to represent him in a world that's burning down? He's going to need a generation that says, though he slay me, yet shall I trust him. And so thank you, God, that even in what we're experiencing right now, where I feel like God's not answering my prayers, I just feel like it's thickening my skin.
Yeah.
Right. And I can grow right here.
Wow.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think like there's this song that is this old song. I'm gonna take you guys like way back to Del Delker, guys.
Please do.
That I remember my dad used to say, and it was something like, if you would you cherish loving arms if you've never like been away? Like, so basically, like, would we really understand? The whole point of this song was like, would we really if we've never had pain, would we really understand the blessings that we have? So if we've never lost, we understand the joy. And not to say that God brings pain into our life. I don't want to say God brings pain into our life to help us appreciate the joy, but there is a sense, right, that when we have suffered, that joy comes in the morning and we are able to experience it a little bit more and be a little bit more appreciative of it.
Listen, can I address that very quickly, which is a very good point. Again, as someone who has historically tried to present himself that everything's okay, especially when you walk into church, there's something to be said when I'm around someone who has gone through, like you mentioned, either deep pain or some sort of pain, and they have faced it, they have come through it, they have realized what God has formed them. And as you mentioned, their gratitude is so deep now. Their gratitude is so real that I'm almost in awe of it. But yet I find myself almost embarrassed to present any pain that I've been through, because it almost seems like I have failed if I've gone through some sort of pain. If I have gone through some sort of pain, I may have failed God. And so is there something maybe in this generation or what we can talk about that addresses that it's not a failure when we've gone through pain, but it's forming this gratitude? And again, as you mentioned, Jennifer, it's not God bringing pain to us. It's he's using it for our benefit. Is there something to be said about that?
I think so. I mean, I read through my Bible cover to cover every year. This last time I went through Matthew, I was like really taken aback because I realized, wait a second, if the heavens were ever going to part and somebody was going to get a smooth walk into their earthly existence, you would think it would be Jesus.
Yeah.
If there was ever going to be a time that an angel was just going to escort you through life, you would think, and in the beginning of Matthew, I'm not even talking about adult man Jesus. I was looking at baby Jesus. And for baby Jesus, we see total chaos surrounding him as he's born, right? So much so that they have to flee, they have to go to Egypt. Then Herod kills all the newborn babies trying to get to Jesus. This is for baby Jesus. And so I think it's helpful to realize, my goodness, if Jesus didn't have a red carpet experience in this world, who am I?
Oh, wow.
Who am I? So there's
Mhm.
no shame in that, to just say we are living in this chaotic, broken system. And even Jesus felt that. And that's just, I think it's part of the human experience. Something that I've been trying to, so my mentor is Jose Rojas. And something that I've been trying to practice through his advice is just believing that, is trying to live a whole life. And
Mm.
I realize this is something that I've come to. So my word, that's like a very Christian thing, right? What's your word for this? My word
Yeah.
is wholeness. And I'm trying to embrace wholeness in my life. And I've just realized, like, does suffering make me less whole? No.
Mm.
Mm-mm.
Suffering makes me more connected to God and more connected to fellow humanity. If suffering doesn't hurt my wholeness, rejection doesn't hurt my ability to be whole. So, and that's why I'm saying the words that we tell our brain matters. It's important for me to just say out loud, I am still a whole human being, even as I go through this horrible experience. And let me say this for anyone who's watching. What if more than God wants to give you success? What if he's going to give you a story?
Mm.
Yeah.
What if
Mhm.
more than your success, he's going to give you a story? A story can be told over and over and over again. And it can inspire every single person who hears it to believe
Yeah.
that they can keep going. Something Beth Moore says is, much of the war against the devil is just about whether or not you'll quit.
Mm.
Oh, that's
Wow.
interesting.
Wow.
It's so funny that you just were talking about your word, because I've been having a little bit of a struggle, the way that things are set up with us at home, like getting through my Bible study every day. And I've just been like, I was telling my best friend the other day, I was like, I just feel like I'm not quite there. Like, I feel like sometimes we ebb and flow in our spiritual walk, and I just don't really feel like the Lord is like with me. Like, I know he's with me, but he's not, talking to me and leading me like he has in the past. And then she goes, it's funny, because I was going to call you. And I was like, do you remember your word for this year? And I was like, no. She's like, it's remember where he's led you. Like, remember how he's been there. And so as we're talking about these words, it's just so funny to me when we talk also about gratitude, is that we pray 11 months in advance for something that's going to guide us through a year, this word. And you're right, this is a very Christian thing to do. I don't know if it's like how it all comes together, but but it's the word that we sometimes need the most, that God is directing us to in the 12th month, right? So like we're going through 11 months of like, what is this about? And it's the 12th month that God just kind of shows up and says, look, I've been here and I've been trying to show you, or I knew you needed this last year for this year. And it's interesting to see how just the little things, when the times when we don't feel grateful, that God has been working so far before us.
Wow.
To help us in that time when we need it the most. It sort of struck me at that moment that he was,
Yeah, Jennifer, you remind me of the story of Joshua. This is one of my favorite stories in the Bible, because one of my favorite texts is when God tells him, "Be strong and courageous." And I actually spoke on this one time where what I saw was that what you just mentioned, God was already there. God already knew where he was going to go, where he was taking them. He just needed them to be strong and courageous. He didn't tell them, and so it's as if God is already there. He knows where he's going to be taking you. And as we mentioned earlier, that trust, I'm still focused on that. Trust is so deep, because that trust leads to gratitude. And we see where God is he's already crossed that bridge. He's already over there. And if I keep reminding myself that, just this gratitude builds over in just who God is. It's not a gratitude of my surroundings. It's not a gratitude of, it could be good things around me. But what I'm saying is, I'm just grateful for who God is. And that, because of the trust. And that is just so powerful for me when I focus on it that way.
Yeah.
Something Jose Rojas says to me is, Heather, if all the devil has to do is hurt your feelings to get you to quit, he's going to win every single time.
Wow.
And so at some point, you have to decide what you see to be true, not what you feel. Because I'll always call him and be like, well, I feel. He's like, I don't care what you feel. Because our feelings aren't relevant in who God is and what we know to be true. Stop telling me what you feel, and I want you to tell me what you know. And
I had a
Those words
Yeah.
matter.
I had a friend who used to say feelings are a poor indicator of faith. Like what you feel should have nothing to do with, like, I feel God isn't here. Well, he is. So
Right. He
yeah,
is. And
right,
you saying that changes how we respond to
right.
the event.
Yeah.
It is a discipline, because I was just, like, I think it would be very interesting, or like it would be easy to have our feelings hurt that God knew that we would fall down, right? Like I needed this word in December, or no, the end of November, because the Lord knew I would be struggling in this time. And he knew he needed to remind me that, like, he was there, and I could be offended by that, that he knew that he would have to pick me up. But I think sometimes it's good for us to remember that God understands we're human and expects us to fall. And he's put these safeguards in place for us, or these motivations in place for us as we keep moving, to pick us back up and put us on our feet and shove us along, knowing full well, by the way, that in 2 weeks from now, I probably will be like, what was that word again?
Yeah.
like I don't remember anything because it's stress and all of this. And I think that the discipline of, and again, I think that it's important, because I think people can watch such shows like this and they say, well, it's easy for you maybe to be grateful, or it's easy for you to be optimistic. And Ruben, you've been really open, like it's not easy for you, like it's something that you've had to work on, or it's something that your wife helps you with. But like everything else, it's a discipline, because I will say too that I tend to be, I say I'm a realist. I wouldn't say I'm a pessimist, but I certainly, like, somebody who is on the program a lot is Sam, and he's an optimist. And I always feel like I'm throwing wet blankets all over Sam, like as he's like coming to me, like I'm just sort of like throwing wet water over his joy, with my realism. But practicing that, sort of looking on the better side and being grateful for what I have, it is something we do to practice, and it is something we have to make an effort for. And I was wondering, Heather, how do you do that every day? Like you've talked about writing 3 things down, but like, how have you made this practice part of your life? Because I think that's important for people to understand, that even if right now you're looking around and you're saying you have nothing to be grateful for and you don't even know where to start, where do we start with this practice?
Yeah, I am somebody that just, the more I spend focusing on myself, the harder all of that becomes. So I am somebody that says, I've done this on my way into work in the morning. I just say, like, I can't control what's happening in my life right now, but who are 3 people that I can do some small gesture that will help them have had a better day? And so I'll just think in my car as I drive to work, who are 3 people that I can go out of my way and do something nice for? And so, like, maybe I'll get somebody a smoothie, or one time I brought my coworker, I just noticed how many long hours she was working. And so I brought her flowers and just said, hey, I've noticed you staying late. I want you to know that. Then I feel good. I get to drive home and I'm like, man, that was nice. We are actually built for service. And this is true of both like Christianity and evolutionary biology. We know that human beings feel better when they serve one another. So if you're struggling, I think it's just an indicator to ourselves. Maybe I'm doing a lot of inward focus right now. Who can I serve? Who can I try to focus and make happy? It will make you happy as a result.
Who can I serve? That's really good. I mean, I know when I'm having a bad day, I may focus on myself, and just what you just now said, Heather, it's just shift my mindset of like, who can I talk to? And sometimes I even think, all right, let me call somebody so they can make me feel better.
I do that too.
I know. Don't we all do that? Let's just.
Maybe it should be the other way around. Like, call or reach out, like you said. I mean, when what you just said, Heather, when you said I noticed, just to hear those words, someone else say, hey, I noticed this about what you're doing, it changes people's perspective. It just brings a smile to their face. And like you said, you go back thinking, man, I did something for someone else. Man, that's powerful for me.
Yeah.
As I was kind of looking through the reasons, like some of the benefits of being healthy before we were getting ready for this program, there a couple things were really obvious. Like when you are grateful, it increases your relationships, make your relationships better, because you say thank you, right? When someone does something to you, you say thank you. And so these relationships start to build, and you start to, like you said, see other people, and you put your you put these grateful vibes sort of into their life as well. I don't want to grateful vibes. Please don't email me, okay? Don't email me.
Yeah.
But one of the cool things was that it also increases empathy. So like I think like, so when you're, and it reduces aggression. So like when you're grateful, you start to be able to, and maybe that gratefulness can come from pain, which I think probably also increases empathy. But like when you're grateful and you start putting that, then you start being a better connection to others. And I thought that was really cool. It also, by the way, decreases aches and pains. And I have no idea how that happens. Like when you are grateful, it actually is physically better. And you said something earlier. You said you and your husband, you were able to go to sleep, and being grateful will increase your sleep and help you sleep better at night. And so like, this isn't something we're just saying like it brings us closer to each other, brings us closer to God, but this is something that's actually psychologically and physically, medically better for you to be in a state of. Ruben, as you go through, like, how do you sort of, you talk about your wife reminds you to be grateful for. How do you and your wife maybe sort of practice that gratitude in your own lives as well?
Absolutely. And I was just going to mention off of what Heather mentioned ourselves. We ourselves are looking for a home. And we went through the process of being told, the house that we wanted was bought by someone else. And so immediately you go through this, oh man, we didn't get it. And you immediately want to just say the world is against us. But in those moments, specifically those moments, we look at each other and my wife, I'll say specific example. She literally said, let's go through 3 things we are grateful for.
I do that too.
Even though we didn't get this house, even though we saw it and we liked it, even though we didn't get it. And to see the smile that comes across our face when we start listing some things, it's just enormous. Because I know I'm more, as I mentioned, I'm more on the pessimist side, but it's just hard to not have the smile when you see both of us. Okay, we're both happy here. We're both grateful. Yeah, it didn't turn out how we wanted. And so it kind of just refocuses us and makes us go forward. And then I'm just grateful that I'm in this situation with her. So we acknowledge what happened. That was key for us. We acknowledged, and then we told ourselves it's okay to be sad about it. It's okay to be sad because we acknowledge why we're sad about it. And now let's be grateful about some other things. That was super key for me.
Yeah.
Interesting.
One of the greatest contributor to our happiness, outranking how much money we make, outranking what job we do or the house that we live in, the greatest contributor to our happiness is actually the relationships that we have. And I think this is important to mention because if we're talking about gratefulness and gratitude and joy and all those things, we don't realize that we will be super intentional about buying a house or about going back to school or about how much money we make at work. We are very unintentional about our relationships. And so if you're trying to figure out where can I start building some of this gratitude, focus on your relationships. Who do you have and who can you lean into? And so I say, I'll have students that will say to me, like, talk about their horrible relationships with their dads. And I'll say, well, what's your relationship like with your mom? Where can you lean in? Don't keep going to the shoulder that you know isn't going to show up for you. You have to start making choices that say, I can't control this person. I can only control my response. Let me lean in to the spaces that are going to fill me back up. And we have to be intentional about doing that as human beings. It's incredibly important for how we are, if we're even able to experience gratitude. Because sometimes I talk to so many students that say, I don't feel anything. I don't feel sad and I don't feel happy. All I feel is numb.
Wow.
I don't even know what to say to that because that's such a horror. I mean, that's such a terrible feeling, Dad. That's worse than not feeling, I guess, sad.
Right. Yeah. And it's because our brains, by the way, our brains can't selectively numb. So if you can't, and what we often will try to do is we say, this is from Brene Brown. She says, here's the bad stuff. Here's my shame. Here's my pain. Here's my divorce. Here's all the stuff I don't want to feel. I'm just going to try to numb this. And we don't realize when we do that we also numb the good stuff. Your brain can't selectively numb. So all your brain does is just say, okay, shut down. That's how I'm going to exist. That's the only way to survive is to shut down. So unfortunately, this is actually really important to say if we're talking about gratitude.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, one of the only ways to feel gratitude, friends, is to feel pain.
Yeah.
That's interesting because I mean, we were talking a little bit about this before the program, and I think that sometimes, you know, Ruben and I, we were in Maryland, and we obviously are experiencing COVID. But as far as the rest of the United States, I don't know, Ruben, how you feel, but we've been pretty lucky as far as our situation. Our state has had relatively lowish numbers. But at the same time, we have people who we are friends with or whatever. Some of my best friends are in California, teaching right in Napa Valley, and they've been evacuated 4 or 5 times, and their house has almost been, you know, burnt, and everything around them, and the school is experiencing, you know, Pacific Union College is experiencing COVID. Our schools are being shut down, and you see your friends, and they're really suffering, and you think like, how can I feel stressed or sad or anything right now other than grateful? But then you fail to acknowledge your own pain, and if what you're saying is true, then it's really hard for me to be very grateful then as well, if I can't even acknowledge my stress and my pain.
Right.
Just
Right.
and I mean, look, I can acknowledge that I'm pretty blessed right now. No matter how painful and stressful, and it's stressful for everyone, I do have blessings. I do acknowledge that. But like, if I can't acknowledge that stress on my own, then it's going to be hard you know, the selective numbing is going to, you know, might kick in.
Yeah.
And that's not good either.
Yeah, there's this great book. It's called Option B. It's by Sheryl Sandberg. She was one of the CEOs of Facebook, and Adam Grant, who is the CEO of SurveyMonkey. And Cheryl's husband, they're, you know, super wealthy, living their best life. They have 2 kids, and they're on vacation in Mexico, and her husband drops dead running on a treadmill. And Adam Grant, who was a really good friend of her husband, she just goes through this super, obviously deep, deep depression. And something that Adam says to her is, it could be worse. And she was like, what are you talking about? This could never be worse. He said, well, what if you lost your kids? And she said, and all of a sudden I realized, and this is some of the research that they put forth in the book, that what you're saying, Jennifer, is actually true. That one of the things that they tell you to do in Option B in this book is think about, how could this be worse? Because then all of a sudden you realize, okay, this isn't the worst thing that could possibly happen to me there. And it could always be worse, unfortunately, right? There's always some other shoe that could drop. And so then all of a sudden she realized, okay, I am in immense pain right now. I can't even fathom what would have happened if I had lost my kids. Right. So life, and we say all that to say also too, life is perspective. We can only ever live our own experience. Some people drown in a mud puddle, other people drown in an ocean. It doesn't change the fact that people are drowning. Right. Life is only about our perspective, but it's helpful sometimes to say, how could this situation actually be worse?
Wow. You know, I wanted to touch on that because it is true. I know for me, I feel we all gone through certain pains in our lives. And then there was time I know that I went through certain pain and I wanted to just suppress it. But then someone told me, just lean into it, acknowledge that pain, lean into it. And so I leaned into it, and I was able to acknowledge it. I remember, and I was verbalizing it to someone, and they said, how can you verbalize this pain? And I said, I decided I'm just going to lean into it, because when I lean into it, right next to it is this gratitude.
Yeah.
Right next to it. And I'm not trying to minimize anyone's pain, but it is true. You know, pain is pain. And so I think I will do a disservice to someone if I don't acknowledge their pain by saying, hey, ignore it. No, let's acknowledge each other's pain. And it could be worse, but that puts it into a certain perspective. Wow, this has been powerful for me.
Do you know
that's so hard to do?
Yeah. In that
so
book,
I commend you.
In Option B, it talks about how there are more people that experience post-traumatic growth than experience PTSD. But you don't know representation. We talk about this all the time, especially in the racial culture that we're living in. Representation matters. So you have to know that there are more people after unimaginable suffering say that they found something that was good in life changing. Obviously not immediately, but in retrospect when they look back. And so it's important to know, hey, something can happen here. And typically it's when we serve where we were most hurt. It doesn't just give our lives meaning, it gives our suffering meaning. And that's a next level thing that a lot of saints won't even ever be able to experience if you don't intentionally try to say, how do I serve where I was most hurt?
Mm, yeah, absolutely. And I can be one to say that there is growth after
Yeah.
pain, for sure. And for me, this is me, and maybe more of you can agree with it. But it wasn't until I acknowledged that pain, because I
Mhm.
had the option of saying I'm going to put it aside, and then it would just fester there to this day.
Mhm.
But when I was able to acknowledge it, and yeah, I kept telling myself it could be worse, because when I think about it, it wasn't as bad as what other people have gone through. But what I told myself, pain is pain, and I look back and this growth that came from it. And another thing, it has allowed me to connect with other people. It has
Yep.
allowed me to connect with
Yes.
people that go through certain pains, the similar to that I did. And I say, hey, I know exactly where you're coming from. And if I
Mhm.
wouldn't have acknowledged it, I wouldn't have been able to do that. And there's this growth that
Yeah.
happened, and gratitude as well.
It's also a really brave thing to do, because I think tendency is to sort of suppress or
Absolutely.
to run away or to sort of work. When I say work through, I don't mean like do internal work on yourself, but like go to work or go to any other vice that helps us like suppress and push that pain aside. And so to actually lean into it is actually a pretty brave thing to do, I think, because what you're doing is saying like, I'm just going to feel what I feel and then come out the other side. And it goes back to what Heather, you were saying, is the trust too, especially as Christians, that God is going to make this for good. He'll turn this for good and help me sort of grow from it as well.
Yeah.
So it comes back to that trusting relationship with
Mhm.
him.
My husband, Thanksgiving is his probably worst holiday. His brother died of cancer when he was,
Mm.
my husband was 18 and his brother had just turned 19. They're only like 14 months apart. And so he sat next to him. He died on November 18th. And he sat next to him as he was on hospice, this 19-year-old kid, right?
Wow.
Passing away. And it's been 16 years since then. And on the exact same day, this November 18th, my husband's a pastor. And so he was sitting next to a church member whose like uncle or something didn't have anybody spiritually. And so my husband came in and sat next to him on hospice as he was dying. And my husband was saying he just had this moment, and it's been 16 years, you guys. And he had this
Wow.
moment as he was sitting there on the exact same day, 16 years prior, as he had sat next to his brother, that he
Mhm.
realized, I could never sit in this chair and empathize with this family. It's going to make me cry to even talk about.
No.
Um,
Yeah. For sure. For
Had I
sure.
not sat in this chair before,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
So, and it's been 16 years for him to see that come full circle. And that doesn't
Yeah.
make it okay, but at least
Right.
then we are, like I'm saying, we can give legs to the things that we couldn't control as we show up for other people. And we actually know what it felt like to be in
Mhm.
that
Right.
moment in a way that somebody else, is thinking. If it was me in that room, I'd be like, man, I don't want to say the wrong thing. What am I supposed to do? He knew
Right.
just being there and sitting was enough because
Yeah.
he'd sat there before.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
What an
You-
awesome way to turn that around.
That's powerful, because what I wanted to say was that I'm not grateful for the pain I went through. I'm grateful for the growth that happened
Yeah.
because of the pain.
Mhm.
And I can sit here right now and tell you, was my pain as in depth as what Heather just mentioned? No, but it was a pain, and the connecting that your husband can do that I could never do, and that I can do that maybe others can't do, is
Right.
how I feel that God is just spreading His word around, that connect
Mhm.
we're able to make with others through this pain. But that was a huge learning person. That's impactful what you just shared with us, Heather. Very, very impactful.
It also is, it's really interesting to me because I think you said something really interesting, and this is sort of when you said like if I went into the room I wouldn't know what to say or do, and it's so interesting how when people have gone through pain, it seems like more and more we know like when we're feeling the same pain as others, the best thing to do is just sit with them
Mm-hmm.
and
Hmm.
hold their hand. And if you're trying to like, I mean, to be there for somebody and you haven't gone through that, you want to say something and you want to do something and you want to like, but when you're able to actually empathize and walk through pain with people, a lot of times it's just sitting with them and holding their hand or giving them a hug.
Hmm.
And we know that through our pain. And it's such a powerful story that your husband was able to do and turn his pain around and do something good for others.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it must be so hard. And he's able to use that in that way.
Yeah.
And
Speaking of gratitude, I just want to mention this one thing. Speaking of gratitude, as what we're talking about, I know I've been grateful for the people in my life that have been able to go through that pain and then be able to connect with me when I was going
Mhm.
through something, so that gratitude element is not only grateful for what God has done for me, but grateful for those as well of what He has done in their lives as well.
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
or just as Heather's husband, that person's probably very grateful for them, for your
Mhm.
husband and what he's been doing. And it's just so impactful just to see how God connects all these things. It's just so impactful to see.
So, it's interesting that something so easy, and I don't want to say easy, but so simple as gratitude has such a big impact on our lives. I mean, we've talked about just in the past 50 minutes um, about how it, for maybe 45 minutes, but it doesn't matter, how it impacts our physical health, how it impacts our mental health, how it impacts our suffering, how it impacts the way we sleep, how it impacts the way we look at our situations. And it feels like sometimes when we talk about gratitude, it's a frivolous thing. Like, I just need to be grateful. Like when somebody hands you something like, oh,
Mm.
thank you. We think of it as just this kind of exchange. Like, you give me something, I'm grateful, thank you. But we see at such a in depth, when you take a look at it in depth and how it impacts every single part of our person and
Mm.
how we live our life. And it's not something that we should be taking frivolously. And you mentioned this a little bit about how we put care into how we buy our homes and how we pick out this or education, or how and we don't put that same care into our relationships sometimes. I know that people always say, like, um my coworker will say to me, like, you work all these hours and you spend this, how do you want to get married if you spend like this many hours at work and this many hours you know doing anything social, and this is like how many hours we have to do social, right? And it's the same thing. Like, how can we expect to, if we spend all of our time just doing stuff, and we limit how many hours we put into that these spiritual practices, how are we expecting them to grow and to develop and affect our relationships as well?
Mm.
And gratitude is such a big one. As we're talking, I'm seeing just how we didn't talk about this program isn't about suffering, but we talked about suffering, and it's not about forgiveness, but I'm sure we could talk about forgiveness, and it's not about relationships, but it's impacted our relationships, and everything that we've talked about, gratitude has been at the sort of core
Right.
of it.
Yeah,
um
absolutely.
So it's interesting to me. And today is Thanksgiving. When people are going to watch, today isn't Thanksgiving, but it will be Thanksgiving when they watch it. And we even in the US have commercialized, first we've commercialized this day, and we've made tomorrow the biggest shopping day of the year. So, like, thank you for everything, we will spend it now.
Yeah.
you know um and a lot of times families will go around and they'll say something we're grateful for, and it's, oh, I'm grateful for family. I wonder how much more meaningful our days would be if we actually took time on Thanksgiving or every day to really really put time into the things that we're grateful for.
Yeah.
um yeah, I don't know how you guys, like, if you're looking at this a little bit differently, and I'm going to be looking at Thanksgiving a little bit differently after this conversation.
Yeah,
um
for sure.
yeah.
I know I will. It's just been something that has been kind of a back of my mind to be more grateful. This is something that, that people that know me, specifically my family, they'll always tell me, got to be grateful and, help others when you can. And now it's constantly being reminded to me, constantly being told to me that I'm like, yeah, I need to do this. And when I do it, I look back and I say, man, it has been so helpful and it's changed my point of view and just like you said, it helps. This healing comes about. It's
Right.
this healing comes about, and it's nothing, nothing mythical or anything mystical or anything like that. It's just there. It happens. And so I think God has created us in a way that we are meant to serve others, and it just shows in how we come about with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I highly recommend that we say to our families, it's something that, especially, we didn't do it so much before the pandemic, but since
Mhm.
the pandemic, we'll all come sit down in a circle, me, my husband, and my kids, and I say, tell me one thing that you're scared about right now, and one thing that you're grateful for right
Mhm.
now? And it's just been a really good check-in for our family to even just hear, uh, just in the beginning of the pandemic, my son, who's 7, was like, I'm scared that I could lose my parents. And I was
Mm.
Mm,
shocked that he was even having those deep of thoughts. So it's important to check in with one another and ask
Yeah.
if it's an intimate moment of building relationship, to say, what are you wishing was different? And what are you most grateful that you're experiencing right now?
Yeah.
yeah. So Heather, you're a parent, and we are going to wrap up in a minute, but I'm wondering how you are, because I especially am very like impressed by how you've managed to, even in some of your bad moments, be grateful for others
Mm.
and for their happy moments, and how you are passing that on to your children, especially at young ages where, um, they might not have that same, you get things when you're a kid and you're happy you have them, but you don't really maybe understand, um, gratitude the way that adults do, and how you're passing that on maybe to your children.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know that I've been super intentional about it, but something that I know I've been really intentional about. I think people who are happy with themselves, it's much easier for
Mhm.
them to be happy for somebody else. And so something I definitely am intentional about with my kids is every night before they go to bed, I tell them one thing that I'm proud of them for.
Mm.
And then I ask
Oh,
them,
nice.
what's one thing that you like about yourself? And the first time I did this, I realized I have a problem because my daughter, who's 9, she said, I can't think of anything
Oh,
that's
wow.
nice about herself. And I was just like, like my little mommy heart was broken.
Yeah.
Whoa, we have to intervene. Like, I want her to love herself and to have
Mm.
good self-esteem, because this is what's going to allow her to not feel threatened by somebody else's success.
Right.
Right. So I just think it
Mhm.
really comes from doing work on ourselves and being honest with where we're at and being able to relay that to somebody else. I think communication relationship is incredibly important.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. That must be so scary as a mom, but to
Yeah.
hear like there's nothing, but I'm so glad that you're able to do that, because I say this a lot. I would not want to be 9, 10, 11, 12 years old right now going into my
Right.
teens in this age, especially, sorry, Ruben, but especially as a woman or as a teenage girl. Um, I think social media is rough on some of
Mhm.
us.
Yeah.
So that you're instilling that in your young, especially both of your children, but especially your daughter, is so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So we are going to get ready to wrap up, and I guess I'm going to start with Ruben and then Heather. If one takeaway from today or one piece of advice that you'd love to give our viewers, and then Heather, after you're done, if you could actually end with a word of prayer for us, that would be great. Okay,
Sure.
Ruben.
Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to say one last thing. Throughout this time, I have been focusing a lot on one of my favorite Bible verses, which is Jeremiah 29:11,
Mm-hmm.
which is, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord." This is this is a text that a lot of people quote a lot of times, share a lot of times, but I dove in a little bit. And the background of that is that God was telling the people who were in a time that they didn't want to be in. He was telling them, get comfortable there, get used to being there, basically make a home there, if you will. And because what he was trying to say is that I already know the plans I have for you. And so when I reflect back on that, it goes back to that gratitude element of like, God is God and he has something for me. Now let me focus on what I'm in right now and let me spread that to other people. And that has changed my focus so much, because I used to use that text kind of just as a throwaway to throw at people. And now it's kind of just shifted my focus as like, God has something here for me. He has something for me to do. And in the future, he already has those things for me set, ready to go. And it shifted my gratitude. And hopefully that can help some people in when it comes to gratitude, because I myself is someone who focuses on the negative, but hopefully we can change that and just start focusing on the positive and lean in to that.
Yeah, I think one of my takeaways that I'd like other people to walk away with is, I'm just thinking of this when I got pregnant with my last child, Soybean, as we call him, his name is Sawyer. My sister was pregnant. She got pregnant, I think, 2 weeks after me. And within about 2 months, she had lost her baby. And it was, so here I have this pregnant belly of joy, and she has this vacant womb of suffering. And it was very difficult for my sister is my best friend. I am her best friend, but it was very difficult on our relationship for the next several months because I was a reminder of what she had lost. And I had to learn that we have to just be willing to walk through the painful, messy parts of life together. And I just want to remind anybody who's listening that you can't selectively numb. And part of how you experience gratitude again, if you don't know how to find it, is to be honest about our pain and to step into it. And your being happy for somebody else doesn't mean that you're super excited about everything that's happening to you. You can allow those experiences of sadness and joy to coexist within you, and that's okay. And God never promises our happiness, actually. What he says is you can have peace. And sometimes peace surpasses understanding. So I just want to let you feel okay, feeling whatever you're feeling. And I just encourage you to reach out to somebody and express whatever is going on. I know that this is a hard time. And the first step is just being honest and finding a relationship that you can lean into and be honest about what you're bringing to the table. And of course, showing up to God honestly about what you're carrying with you. And just trust me when I tell you, he is big enough to handle your bitter, broken pieces. I promise that. Did you want me to
and he says,
oh
yes, please pray. No, I was going to just say, and he promises he will, I have a colleague who says her father died and her husband died. And he says that she rests in that the Lord will return the years that the locust has stolen. So, and we don't know when that will be or what, but the plans that he has for us. So he is so big in taking care of us. So yes, please pray for us.
Yeah, let me pray for us. Dear Heavenly Father, I want to tell you that I'm grateful. I am grateful that we can experience pain and rejection and still be whole in you and still be wholly connected to one another. And God, I just pray for your presence to surround everybody who is watching right now, Lord. We know that in the last days, your spirit will withdraw, but the promise is actually that your spirit will pour out. It's not just that the world is going to withdraw from your spirit. It's that you will raise a generation that you will pour your spirit out on, and we will be connected with you in a way that we can't even fathom right now. And so, God, I pray for your spirit. I pray for the outpouring of your spirit. I pray that you will be able to find grateful hearts. I'm just thinking of what you say. You say, when I return, will I find any faithful? Lord, I pray that you will find us faithful and whole, even in our brokenness, God, because we are spiritual beggars, and that doesn't make us less than. The point is that we are wholly reliant on Jesus Christ. And so I thank you that we have a Savior. In your name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Heather and Ruben, for being here and having this important conversation. We hope that everyone watching will have learned something through it and gotten something out of it, and take some time to practice this idea of gratitude and trust that we've talked about. And we hope that even if you are not in the United States, if you are somewhere else, that you will join us for Thanksgiving and taking at least today and focusing on your gratitude. So we will see you next time on A&N in Depth.